Good morning or afternoon, depending on your location, and thank you for joining us today for our technical webinar. Today's webinar is going to be titled XER versus XML, Tradition versus Data Integrity. Myself, Dan Beck, and Bill Ocharzak will be your presenters today. Bill's going to help me out just in case. Had a little dishwasher problem this morning, so waiting on the maintenance guy to show up, so he's going to help me out as much as possible. We have a couple of housekeeping items that we'd like to discuss before getting started. First and foremost, all call-ins or the lines will be muted automatically. This will allow us to preserve the quality of the audio for all attendees as we are recording this webinar for some people that could not attend at this time. If at any time there's any questions during the session, there is a questions box. You can submit your questions, and time permitting, we're going to try and answer as many as possible. If we cannot get to all the questions today, we will send a follow-up email, usually within about a day or so. This follow-up email will include a copy of the slideshow presentation. It's going to include a link to the recording of the webinar that you can share with colleagues. And it's also going to have the question and answer log as well. A couple other items we need to go through our safe harbor statement. The statements that will be made in this presentation are based on our current knowledge of the tools and should not be viewed as official vendor perspective. We're giving our take on what we feel is the best information for our clients and our colleagues. Most people on the webinar know who we are, know what we do. For the people that do not, we are a project controls implementation company. We also have a managed hosting services arm of our company as well too. We provide training. We provide some kind of out-of-the-box proprietary softwares, some integration tools that we use. We also are support service and partnering. And we are also a certified through federal, California, and New York disabled veterans business enterprise as well too. These are the tool matrix that we deal with. Obviously, there are some other tools out there that we use on a regular basis, but the tool sets that you see here, we support these project controls tools as an authorized partner, trainer, and implementer, as well as we provide training and supported staffing resources for these tool sets. So to get to the presentation, what we're going to talk about, again, is XER versus XML, tradition versus data integrity. We get a lot of questions from people throughout different industries as to what file formats should and should not be used when using P6. We're going to go through some similarities, some differences, some issues that we see, and obviously data security that you can have with these types of file formats within P6. Our agenda for today's webinar, we're going to talk about what is an XER file, what is an XML file. We're going to show some issues that we see with the different types of file formats, talk about some differences and similarities between both types of file formats, whether you're doing an export or you're doing an import. We're going to go through some screenshots of when you do import and export an XER file, and then when you also import and export an XML file to show those differences and similarities. And then we're also going to go in the software live to show you the screenshots where we can set up data securities, how we can monitor what information is coming in and what information is going to go out. We're going to have a little summary period, and then we're going to go into our questions and answers if time permits us to. So to get started, most people in our industry know what an XER file is. It's the standard proprietary file that allows our users to transfer project files. The Oracle Primavera proprietary format will support all our project, resource, and role information that our users develop in P6. And the XER format enables users to export, import data between all versions from version 5 up to the current version of 16.1. And 16.2 is due to come out within the next week or two. We don't have a firm date just yet, but we do know it should be the beginning of October sometime. Also, an XER file, it's a text file, and it can be opened with a text editor for view rights. This is the question we get a lot. What is an XML file? The XML file format will enable users to share not only our project data, but will allow us to share layouts that are associated with the project and baselines that are associated with that project as well too. And this will flow back and forth between both professional and EPPM, which is the web component. An XML file can be used to provide more import and export functionality options. We're going to get into those options and kind of show you what those options can be. It also allows us for a higher level of granular control over our data import. We can move global codes and calendars to project level data, or we can remove them right out of the import as well too. It allows us to go in and we can map our codes, our user-defined fields, resources, and calendars to existing values that are already in the database, or we can rename those or obviously remove them from our import. Just like the XER file, an XML is also a text file, but it has an open structure that has come into common use with the exchange of data over today's internet. We're going to talk about some of the issues that we see with these file formats, and we're going to start with XER. It is a low level of data control when a file is being imported. We also have to ask the question when we're sending files back and forth between clients and colleagues, what version is that other party using? If you're using a higher version, they're using a lower version, we need to know what version it is to save it in that version to send off to them. When you're talking about layouts, if you want to share your layouts with either clients or colleagues, you have to export those layouts separately, and then the other individual has to import them individually. And then we're also going to talk about OBS tables. Oracle will tell you this issue has gone away. I'm going to actually show you a slide using version 15.2 that it is still there. It also depends on the file format that you're receiving back from the other party. What are some of the issues we see with XML? XML, it allows us for a very high level of data control when importing. There are no issues with versioning control, so I don't have to worry about what version the other person is using because they can import or export a XML file. When we do send an XML file, we can include our layouts in that file that will be loaded up when they import that file. And we can also export and import baselines that are attached to that project. Going back to the OBS tables issue, this gets asked a lot. I know we've done some tech tips. We've talked about it quite frequently at events. You know, how many people have encountered this issue? And how is this issue resolved? And you can see I received a file from a client that had 60,000 OBS tables included in it. So there are multiple tools that are on the market that can help you scrub these tables. We recommend to people using Ron Winter's SAE Purge POBS. It's a free program. I've even included a link that you can go in and download it from as well too. It'll help you clean up your schedules. But if you don't go in and scrub these files, it's going to keep occurring. But according to Oracle, this issue is to be resolved. We still see it in version 16.1. But again, it has a lot to do with the version and the files that are coming over from your clients or colleagues. One of the issues that we see for version 16.1 when you are exporting or importing an XML is it has to be handled through job services. So when I go to export a file and I go through the whole export mode, you can see in the screenshot below on the left that the job is scheduled for export, and I can check the status and download the file from the job status dialog. So this particular format is a P6 professional connected to an EPPM database. So I actually have to go into EPPM and I will get a notification. You'll see the notifications box on the bottom right. That notifications will come up on your front screen when you log into EPPM, and it'll tell me that my import job has been submitted and it completed successfully. On an export, my export job was submitted and was completed successfully as well too. When I do an export in 16.1 with having a professional, P6 professional and EPPM connection, I would physically have to go in and download that file to be able to save it and then send it off to the other party that would be in receiving of that. Now, if you don't have access to EPPM in the network, you would have to get an administrator to go in, download that file, give the file to you, and then you can send it out, whether by email or other format or sharing. So this is a little issue that we see with 16.1. We've brought it to the attention of Oracle. Whether this gets changed or not, I'm not really sure. I don't have all the specifics for future versions. But again, this is only a problem if you are a power user and professional and you are utilizing an EPPM database connection. What we're going to talk about now are some similarities and differences between XML and XER. First, we're going to talk about the exporting format, and then we're going to get into the importing format. So this table that we've developed will talk about differences between XML and XER in export formats. So we start with our functionality portion of it. So our data formats. Obviously, we all know XER is a proprietary format. XML is now starting to become an industry standard format. It also has the option of multiple projects. XER and XML both support exporting multiple projects at once to a single file. Baseline export, which we touched on a little bit, and we're going to talk a little bit more, is XER does not support the export of baselines, but XML does support the export of baselines, and we're going to show that in some screenshots and in the live demo. The last one on this page for export is job services. XER supports scheduling exports on a regular basis. XML does not support job services. We're going to talk about our import formats with our differences and similarities. So we start getting into security. XML will enforce the individual security settings for the user, where XER will allow updates to all data as long as you have the import project security privilege set. So XML has a very higher level of security set to it as compared to XER. The last one on this slide is the exclusive project access. XML will always open a project as exclusive. XER accesses projects as shared, which means other users can update data in the middle of the import process. And to continue on to the import formats, we have committing data. XML will not commit partial data. XER can end up with partial commits of data. Again, this is going to be based on the settings of the user for the data. Next item is work shift handling. XML can replace any existing work shifts within the project. What XER will try to do is to insert work shifts, and this has a potential of corrupting some of the shifts or the data within those work shifts. Multiple projects, both XER and XML both support importing of multiple projects from a single file. And then the last one, similar to the export format, baseline, XER does not support the imports of baseline. XML will support importing a baseline, and we're going to show a little bit more on that. We're going to go through some screenshots of showing importing and exporting of an XER file to kind of give you an idea of what we're going to be looking at when we start talking about our security of data, flexibility of data, and the stability of our data. A lot of people are familiar with this. You select the XER file format, you select your import type. Are you going to bring in the project, only your resources, only your roles? We obviously have to grab where that file is. And then we get into our import project options. Where do we want to import it to? This next set of slides allows us to update our project options, and I can create create or modify different types of layouts for these project options. So I can go in and add it, I can modify it. All I did was click modify, and this is the type of data that I can go in and check. And I actually hit one of the drop-down boxes, especially using calendars, because calendars seems to be a question that always comes up when importing and exporting data. So with the calendars that are associated to this particular project, do I keep the existing calendars? Do I not import them? Can I insert new? Can I update the existing? And these gives you just a few ideas of what is allowed. It's very, very minor in the detail that it allows you to look at when utilizing an XER format. So now we're going to talk about exporting in an XER format. And again, we select our XER, and there's your drop-down menu for which version. I need to know what version the other party's running. Are they running the same version? Are they running an earlier version? If they're running a later version, say 16.1, they will be able to load it up because it will go up, but it won't go down. Again, project only, resource only, role only. Where do I want to export this project to? Make sure I have the correct project selected that I want to export. If I'm only doing one or if I'm doing multiple, I can check to see which projects are set up in the file to export. We're going to get into some screenshots of importing and exporting of an XML file. This is going to look a little bit different for people that aren't familiar with XML. So I'm going to select the XML. It's going to ask me for the file name. And there's two ways you can see an XML. It's either going to be listed as a zip file or as an XML file. And we're going to discuss that in just a couple of slides, the differences between the two. Now, in my import project options, it gives me the availability to import baselines. So if there's baselines attached to this file, I can go in, I can click on that, and it'll give me a listing of all the baselines that are attached to that particular file. And if it only has one, I can come in, I can click on the import button, and what it's going to do is it's going to import the baseline that is attached to that schedule. We also have an option underneath here that I can import project level layouts, and we're going to discuss that just a little bit more in a couple of minutes. So this is going to look a little bit different than in the XER format where I can go in and update my project options. And I'm going to show a little bit more of this in the live demo to give you a better understanding of this. But when I create either a template or I can modify the existing template that comes with the software, which is your default template, it gives me access to some basic information, advanced information, then obviously our global and our project. And in the drop-down menu, it's going to give you the exact same information that we saw. This just goes at a little bit higher level, and we're going to see that when we get into the software live. So to expand a little bit further, what I've done is I've gone in and I've selected the import options. I've gone to my calendars, and you can see that in the middle picture, that what I can do is I can actually check the details of the calendar, which I don't have that ability to do in XER. So if I press that details key for that particular calendar, it's going to show me what the work times are for that particular calendar. This one is Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. So I can verify if I have the proper calendars, do I have the proper times, and you can go through this with these calendars. And if you don't want to bring in all these calendars, there's in that drop-down menu, I can select do not import, and we're going to show that again in a little bit. So once you go through and select the data that you want to import, it's going to tell you that we're finished, we're ready to import it. But one of the good things we get is once our import result is successful, it gives us the option of checking what's called a log file. And in this log file, It's going to show us what was imported, what was not imported, if we had items that matched, what did not match. This is a little bit hard to read, trying to get everything into one little slide, but this gives you a log file that shows what I brought into my database, what I did not bring in. Do we have items matching or not matching? So this is a really good indicator where I can track what information I just brought into my database. Now we're going to talk about exporting. If I need to send a file to somebody, I'm going to select my XML format. It's going to ask me which projects I want to export, and then I also have the option of exporting my baselines. So I would select that item right there. It'll bring it up to show me what baselines are attached to this particular project, and then I can click on if I want to export them or if I do not want to export them. The next thing it'll ask us is if we want to export all of our project level layouts. Do I want to send those layouts for the other person to view that I have associated to this project, or do I not? And then obviously our export would be completed. But what I want to do is add a little bit of information that I touched on just a little bit ago between the difference of a zip file and a regular XML file. So when I decide to export all of the project level layouts, it will create that file as a zip file for me to send to the other user. If I select to not send the project level layouts, it's going to create that file as just a normal XML file for them to import. So that's how you can tell if they included the project level layouts or if they did not include by the ending of it, whether it's a zip or just a regular XML file. We're actually going to go in the software and we're going to show the exporting of an XML file and then the importing of an XML file. We're going to talk about the template options, and we're actually going to look at the log file as well too. So if I decide that I want to grab a file that I want to export to an XML file, I already have a project already open. We're just going to go in and we're going to select our export option. I can select the XML file structure. And this is where it comes into baselines to export. So if there are baselines attached, I can select that, and if it'll show me the baseline that is attached to the schedule. If I want to export it, all I have to do is click on this box. And I can click OK. I can select Next. And there we created it as a zip file. If I decide that I do not want to export project level layouts, it has changed it to an XML file. So that's how you'll be able to tell the difference. Once I'm ready, I can click Finish. It has sent my file out. It's going to be ready once it's saved that I can send it off to the other party I would be dealing with. If I'm looking to import a file in XML format, I'm going to select XML. It's going to ask me what file I want to bring in. Now, do I want the option to import the project level layouts that were sent with this file, or do I not want to? It'll give me that choice. It does not change the file structure on the import because it is a zip file, so we do know that those layouts are attached. It's going to ask me where I want to send it to, and do I want to import the baselines that are attached to it. So it does show that there is a baseline attached. If I want to import that, again, I select the box. I click, it shows that here's the baseline plan. I click Next. And here's where we get into our update project options. And again, I can create multiple templates if need be. I can actually go in and look at the template that's set up by clicking Edit. And it gives us some basic information at the global level, at the project level, but there's also an advanced tab that'll take us into our codes, our user-defined fields, our calendars, and our resources. I'm going to select the calendars option, and here's that details tab. So if I click on that details tab, it's going to bring up the details of that particular calendar that I have selected so I can look at the work times that are associated to this. One of the also options is if I don't want these other calendars, it has a drop-down menu that I can move it to a project calendar, do not import, or I can keep it. So if I see calendars on here that may not be associated, I can set this to do not import. I'm going to go back to our basic tab, and we also have a listing of our global and our resource calendars. This doesn't give us the option of being able to view the details. That's why we go into the advanced tab, but I can do the same thing. I can keep existing, do not import, insert new, or I can update the existing. Update existing would be if I have that calendar already in my file and maybe somebody made changes to it, it's going to update it for that calendar that I am bringing in. Now with this template, if I make any changes to this template, I can do a save as, or I can just keep that template the way I have it set up. I am all set with all my project information. I'm ready to finish the import. I'm going to click Finish. And once this is complete, we are going to look at the log file that is associated to this particular project that I am importing. So now it's complete, it's imported. I can look at that log file, and it's going to tell me the information. I have cost accounts, currencies, user-defined field types, what matched. So it shows that one had matched my database. It was not imported. If we did not have any that matched, it would tell us if it did not match, if it was imported, if it was not imported. It depends on those securities that we set up in those template options. If I did not want to import, if I wanted to keep existing, if I wanted to update existing. So this is a really good information that I can see what was brought into my database by that project. And this is something that not a lot of people know about that are only familiar with using the XER format. So now that we've gone through some of the differences, some of the similarities, some of the issues, a question that comes up is what method is better to use? Obviously, that's dependent upon not only the user, maybe the client, maybe the organization. It could possibly be the owner. A lot of owner specifications that you see nowadays ask for XER formats. But on that security side of it, can I send all of my project information or just partial information? Do I want to send all of my layouts, baselines with it? Am I going to have to go in and export my layouts associated to that project and then have the other person import them individually? Data security. I can track what data is coming in and out of my database using those template options. If you are doing XER files and you've been doing them a long time, you start going in, you look at your calendars, you look at your resources, you look at your codes, you're going to start to see that all these files that you've been bringing in over time is going to start to fill up your database. As you fill up that database, what happens? You could potentially use up all of your memory. If your memory is full, it may not allow you to open up the software. So that's another consideration you have to take into effect, is being able to monitor what data is going in and what data is going out of your P6. And then it gets back to the specifications call for XER. Most specifications do call for XER. That may change in the future as Oracle is moving more and more to XML, especially in EPPM. You can only import and export in the XML format. In Professional, it still is an option for XER. But some of the organizations we've seen, especially government organizations, the Army Corps of Engineers, Department of Defense, Department of Energy, the DCMA, the Defense Contract Management Agency, they've all standardized on an XML format using that UNCEF fact.
Hi,
sorry about that. My guy just showed up. But you can start to see that some of these government organizations are utilizing the XML format. All right, we've come down to the end of the presentation, and I believe there were a few questions that were submitted. Bill, were you able to get those questions?
Yeah, Dan, if you want to go to the next slide just to show the upcoming events, and you could go on mute and don't have to call, but I can handle the questions from here.
Oh, okay, I'm going to mute myself and I'm going to move into the library.
Okay, great. Okay, the first question was, let me pull up our box here. Are there any limit to a number of baselines that can be exported in an XML file? Right now with the current version, I'm not sure what's coming out in 16.2, but there's only one baseline right now that could be exported out with that project. So maybe as versions come out each year, maybe that will be something that could be able to actually grab multiple baselines, but that's a good project. So a good question. We have another question. What version of P6 started supporting saving multiple schedules in an XML format? And that's a good question, Ron. I believe it was 8.3 that gave you the ability to start grabbing multiple projects. In the 8 series and lower, as you know, you can only do one project at a time, so there was limitations to that XML, so they are definitely giving it more power as the versions come up. So I believe that's 8.3. So if you have 8.2 and lower, you won't be able to grab multiple projects as an XML format. And there's more of a statement here. XER Import also has a log file that shows the results of the import. There's just not a link, which is correct. And let's see here. Are there any known issues with changing global calendars to project calendars during this import? Not that we're aware of. From my personal experience, I didn't have any issues with doing that, so none that we know of. And then the last question here is any idea on how long an XER format will be around? When you guys find out what's coming out in the new versions, that's usually what we find out. So Oracle really doesn't give us too much information until those versions are released. So that's an Oracle question that they may or may not know the answer to. So I'll just go over some upcoming events. In San Diego coming up in a couple weeks, we'll be at the CMAA National Conference down in San Diego. So if you want to swing down there and say hello to Dan and Brian, Chris, and a few other of our consultants will be there. And then we have the AAC International in November in the Woodlands, Texas. And then the CPM conference at the Swan and Dolphin Resort in Florida this year. So out of Louisiana back to Florida this year, so for the CPM. So this concludes our monthly webinar. We, as mentioned in the beginning, we will put together a list of all the questions and we will respond with answers, and in addition to this slide deck and the webinar recording we'll send out within the next couple of days. So thanks again, and we look forward to seeing you on future webinars.